every time I went to his Sunday service, I would see sometimes segregated burial ground. I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Hey, I want you to talk about those burial grounds, but I also want you to bring the communities together."
Welcome to the Wicked Truth Podcast, Third Things First. I'm your host, Suzanne Ross, for conversations with peacebuilders who have learned through long experience how to free communities caught in conflict for something better. When conflicts bog down, it's usually because things have deteriorated so badly that it feels as if there's only two choices left. You're either with me or you're against me. So, to diffuse the rivalry and delegitimize violence, seasoned peace builders inject a third thing into the mix, a work of art, like a movie or a poem or a song, something that creates a third option, something that rivals haven't thought of yet, which is that it is possible to build a shared future together where everyone can flourish in peace. So, what I hope for you is that you'll find renewed hope and have your imagination sparked as you join us for conversations with our guests who are sharing their experiences about how to live with conflict and find abundant life. So, friends, today we are going to talk about a conflict that has bedeviled efforts at a solution for generations. I'm talking about the racial divide here in the US. It's historic. I don't know, Julia, how far back it goes. I'd say to our founding as a nation and maybe earlier, but it's certainly been with us for way too long. And so today I invited you with us, Julia, because I want our audience to meet someone like you because you have given me hope that we can do better because you are doing better. And so I really am delighted that you are with us today. And it is a pleasure to formally welcome you, Reverend Dr. Julia Robinson Moore, to the Wicked Truth Podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to be here and have this conversation.
Yes, and you're joining us from your home in Charlotte.
I am Charlotte, North
North
Carolina.
Carolina. Yeah, that's great. I've been fortunate enough to visit you in your hometown. But let me introduce you just briefly,
Mhm.
Julia, because we'll post your bio with the interview. You are an ordained pastor in the Presbyterian Church USA. You're trained as a historian, and you're an associate professor of religion at University of North Carolina, Charlotte, UNC Charlotte, where you teach courses in African American religious history and religions of the African diaspora. Now you have your first book, Race, Religion, and the Pulpit, which explores the history of the first Black Baptist church in Detroit. You're from Detroit, is that right?
And I am
Yes,
born.
you're from Detroit. Okay. And your current book project, Rethinking Lynching and Mimetic Theory, explores the history of lynching in North Carolina through the lens of Rene Girard's mimetic theory. And I first met you at a Girard conference giving lectures on lynching as a scholar of the history of lynching.
Mhm.
And I was very impressed by the way in which you tackled such a very difficult subject because it's just difficult for the descendants of whether you're a descendant of a perpetrator or a survivor or
Mm,
bystanders or
that's
it's
true.
just really hard to talk about. It was hard for me to listen to
Mhm.
tell you the truth. But this isn't just an academic exercise for you. You have a strong interest in moving beyond this kind of violence and the divisions it either creates or that led to it. I don't know, which way it goes. Um, but I wanted to ask you first to maybe talk about what inspired you to work on racial healing beyond your academic interests in it. What is behind your motivation to make things better?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I guess I have to go back to my childhood when I was 8 to 9 years old. My parents brought a camper. It was a used camper. And my mother decided when I was about 10 that she was going to go off to a camping trip at the KOA
Oh, yes.
in Howell, Michigan. Howell, Michigan is about 40 minutes outside of Detroit proper. And we left in the late afternoon and got to the KOA campground around dusk. And what we thought were campground lights were actually torches. My mother immediately looked over at the open area at the campground and realized that these were Ku Klux Klan members and they were holding a service, if you will. She immediately told uh, me and my girlfriend, who was her girlfriend's daughter, to get to the bottom of the camper and keep our faces down and basically hug the floor. And she turned the lights off of the camper. By this time, it's pretty dark on this campground road, which is nothing but gravel. And she slowly but surely backed the camper up, hoping that the people would not see us.
Yeah.
As a little girl, I had all sorts of questions around what was happening. And I also wondered about some of the images I saw. My
Mhm.
mother's sometimes a person of few words, so she decided to just plot me in front of the Eyes on the Prize videos that happened to be airing in when I was 10 years old on the national TV broadcast. And I saw images of the burning crosses. I saw images of people dressed in white and saying that they were burning the cross in honor of Jesus. So that just left me with the whole horde of questions.
Mhm.
And those questions have driven my career. They've also driven the ways in which I seek to bring peace about for people who have been divided by race and ethnicity. And
Mhm.
so that's how I got started. And that question has always been the front runner. And Renee Girard's work, mimetic theory, helps me not only uncover the nuances of anti-Black violence or just racial violence in itself, it also allows keys for unraveling that violence as
Mm.
well.
Yeah. No, that's what has kept me engaged with, the mimetic theory as well, is that it diagnoses, explains how it happens, but by knowing how it happens, it
Mhm.
helps you figure out, well, how then can we interrupt that cycle, right? And you've
Yeah.
done wonderful work, in that area, not just theology. You've done good theological work too, but you've done such practical work. Um, I think maybe let me ask you this question first, because I do want to get into really exploring your ministry in Charlotte and what you're doing there, which is so unique. Um, but when what we're talking about here is a conflict that's gone on for so long that it's sort of it's infected the culture. It's becomes embedded in the structures of our
Mhm.
society. And I wonder if you could talk about the particular challenges to peace building, to conflict resolution when a conflict has gone on so long that it has these almost hidden, invisible imprints, in the culture.
Yes, yes, that's another great question. Let me answer you in two formats. The first format is this around the particular cultural context of the United States and what I would consider its unfinished conversation around the history of slavery. And
Mm. Mhm.
when there are unfinished conversations, when there's been gross conflict or oppression, each generation carries the stories of their forebears.
Hmm.
And so, anytime we talk about racial inequality or the legacies of slavery, we are always talking to individuals who have probably been told stories of how their ancestors were treated unfairly or were oppressed or suffered violence.
Mhm.
And that's a particular challenge to peace building because people come with stories already to the table.
Yeah.
Those stories are connected to emotional pain. And even if they themselves haven't gone through those particular stories, if their loved ones or their ancestors have gone through it, that's still a kind of secondhand or third. And so America has those kinds of emotional and cultural landscapes to navigate around race and ethnicity challenges, things that have gone on in the past, and also trying to envision any. The other thing I could speak to is mimetic theory often points us to the revelations that those who are continuing the conflict or those who are in rivalry, for example, my oppression is deeper than your oppression. They often forget that they are so mirroring each other that they lose sight
Right.
of who they are. They lose their own identity.
Mhm.
So if we translate that, we have whole communities that are so caught up in the mimetic rivalry of racial oppression that they have
Mm.
lost sight of who they are as human beings. So those are some of the challenges I've seen, and there's been some unique ways that my husband and I have tried to navigate what that peace building looks like on the ground, and
Right.
that there's some ways that I, as a scholar, have tried to.
Because what I hear you saying is that, people maybe avoid these kinds of conversations because they're bringing trauma into it that will just get triggered, or it feels too hard or uncomfortable or scary or whatever
Mhm,
to even
mhm,
engage in the conversation. And I know, um, I've sat in on some of your, workshops where you give people some tools.
mhm,
You
mhm.
call it capacity building
Yeah,
for
that's
how
right.
to sit in a difficult conversation. And I know that's the kind of maybe a step one that you engage with, but maybe you could talk about that a little bit in the context of the work you're doing with the churches in Charlotte. And if you could explain how um, you've discovered a third thing that is very unusual, that has helped create community in a way that maybe is people would be surprised to hear. So maybe I'll let you introduce your project and how you found it and how it helps bridge the divide within the Presbyterian churches, black and white in Charlotte.
Okay, okay. So, just how I got started, I was looking for another book project, and I was reflecting on the churches I had been around here in Charlotte. I said, "Oh, I'll just write on Presbyterian churches in the city of Charlotte." I've been preaching in churches all around Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. As I was thinking about the book, I kept realizing every time I went to his Sunday service, I would see sometimes segregated burial grounds. Prayer, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Hey, I want you to talk about those burial grounds, but I also want you to bring the communities together." And I was like, "Oh, it's a lot of work. I don't think I will do that." But I eventually did, and the first church that was willing to work with me already had a group of people, predominantly white church, already had a group of people that had been praying about what to do because they wanted to memorialize and do right in the unmarked burial ground.
Mm.
This church, a Providence Presbyterian church, had a long history of enslaving human beings, as many churches around America and certainly in the South had. And so, from ministers, elders, and deacons from the colonial and antebellum period, owning enslaved people as uh, human chattel was just part of the culture.
Yeah.
And many of them were buried in segregated burial grounds. So The descendants are still living in the city of Charlotte, just sometimes 2 to 3 blocks away from each other, sometimes 5 miles. I'm looking at sixth or seventh generations from both those who enslaved people and those who were enslaved.
Mm.
And many of the enslaved descendants, their former ancestors who were enslaved and now got free after the Civil War, they don't know where their ancestors are buried.
Yeah.
So the work is through my nonprofit with my husband, More Grace Ministries. And so we work with church communities, not to blame and to shame, but to tell the truth and bring communities together. So, what does that look like on the ground?
Mhm.
The very first group of people that we bring together, so you need to get the picture that we're in a room and we might have sixth or seventh generation of descendants who were part of a slave owning family. And then maybe across the table are the people that their ancestors, the descendants of the people that their ancestors owned. And you can imagine the tension that could possibly be in the room.
Sure.
But we introduce two things. We introduce neuroscience and the practices of learning how the right hemisphere of our brains work, especially when they're feeling overwhelmed by certain negative emotions. And we introduce the spiritual practices of the Immanuel approach. The Immanuel approach is actually asking God into core memories. Some of those memories are memories of joy, because that gives you your body and your brain capacity to enter harder memories of pain, of hopeless despair, of anger. And so we teach two kinds of skills. One, how to recognize how your right brain is working and how it affects your body and your emotions. Uh,
Mm.
two, how to hear the voice of God and invite the presence of the Spirit into hard memories.
Mhm.
So, in a nutshell, that's how we kind of navigate this tension-filled landscape.
Do you work with the groups separately first? Do you work with the descendants of the
Mhm.
slave holders separately from the enslaved?
So I have to be honest, the very first time we started off, we were not afraid to make mistakes. And so the very first time we had all groups together, and that was where we learned that people were carrying stories of trauma
Sure.
from both sides. There were different levels of trauma, different kinds of trauma, but there was fear, there was anger. The African American groups had lynchings in their family history that were pretty recent in terms of great grandfathers or
Mm.
being subject to that violence. So we realized the second time around, we needed to work with our communities separately first to build emotional capacity. And what that looks like is you can become your best self and remain calm and relational in the middle of feeling anger or hopeless despair or sadness. And so we work with our communities really a long time. We work with them almost 8 months separately,
Mm.
and then we bring them together 2 to 3 months, teaching them to have heavy conversations, but stay relational with each other and connected to God. So,
Mm. Wow. I think that we could all use that in our lives nowadays. We all seem to be angry a lot and not our best selves
mhm,
most of the time.
that's right.
Um, but I'm wondering, Julia, how does the having the concrete work of restoring the grave sites, how does that impact? Just why is that kind of what that kind of sparked people to want to have these conversations? Was it just the physical presence of the neglect was so hard to ignore?
It was. Most of the churches I work with, there's always a group of people who know of the history of division after the Civil War.
Yeah.
And they've been very aware of the Black Presbyterian churches that descended from them. So there's always a group of people that know that that unmarked burial ground has still living descendants. And I
Yeah.
think that compels people to want to work together. And when you step on the site of an enslaved burial ground, the ground speaks to you and it just tells you that human beings were here that needed to be recognized and honored, and they're looking for their descendants to recognize them. And so I think it's a twofold thing. Churches who owned enslaved burial grounds, who had a history of slavery, they're trying to envision a better body of Christ, a more
Mm,
unified body. And
sure.
then for those who are discovering and looking for their ancestors, unmarked burial grounds just compel them to come and search and hear and listen to the voices that have been silenced.
And it's just a wonderful shared project that everyone can gather around.
It
You
is.
work with architects and students as well, um, landscape design.
That's right.
There's a whole group of skills and talents and creative minds that come together around this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found that students, architects, urban landscapers, their voices lend a kind of neutrality. So even if churches are afraid to work with each other, even as they build emotional capacity, those voices that are outside their cultural context, students who have just the voices of an assignment, or architects who just look at the built environment, they kind of leverage a kind of you think through how to envision the site, how to bring reconciliation, and how to build a future together.
Hmm.
So this kind of work cannot be done by one person. It's always done through relational community.
Gosh, I just love that. And they're also, I mean, like you say, there are some sites that are obvious that people know they're there, that there are neglected grave sites, but you're also discovering, I think people are coming to you now with, I think there's a grave site in my backyard or something. Are there, you're uncovering a lot of these sites sort of,
Mhm.
that aren't part of a churchyard.
Yes, yes. I think I have so many stories, but one story is I was invited to a person's home, and the home was built on a former plantation of one of our ancestors. And as soon as you walk to the curb of the house, you see these gigantic field stones. And the field stones line the front of the house, they line the driveway, and then you go back behind the house, and there's a chapel there without a steeple.
Hmm.
And that was a chapel for enslaved human beings on that plantation. The owner wanted his enslaved people to have church services and to have their own minister, own African American enslaved minister.
Wow.
But the entire house is in the middle of an enslaved burial ground.
Oh my gosh.
And the family has worked to keep developers from encroaching on the burial ground. They've maintained that house because they know that the land is sacred. So I get different stories um,
Yeah.
like that. And again, even to have that conversation, I think that hits the point about the title of the podcast is this third option, the third thing that comes in is you can have these kind of hard conversations, and people can feel free to disclose even the history of their own connection to slavery
Mhm.
when they begin to learn how to walk in peace. And the
Yeah.
first way to do that is not just share a bunch of historical data,
Mhm.
but to recognize whatever emotions are going on in yourself and teaching yourself how to stay relational as you share that history.
Yeah.
And then bringing in the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Christ, Jesus into those spaces. So,
Yeah. I love that, Julie. I mean, we could have another a conversation about prayer and the efficacy of prayer and prayer
mhm,
practices, but this is a wonderful example of, that prayer changes you,
it does.
changes the prayer. And
Yes.
so I love that. I love talking with you about that, and I love praying with you.
Mhm,
Um, so,
yeah.
um, Julia, I want to encourage people to learn more about your work, and we'll post links to your work. But before we close, I wanted to just ask you a question that I want to ask all our guests, which is, at Third Things First, we want to create hope for folks, and like you say, sometimes we need to attend to our feelings first of
Mhm.
all. And I think for me personally, the sign that I'm starting to lose hope is that I get really grumpy and angry, and I lose, a feeling of joy about life. And so I'm wondering if I could ask you, not where you're finding hope, but where you're finding joy. Where are you connecting to joy
Oh,
these
that's such
days?
a beautiful question. I am connecting with joy in memories of gratitude.
Mm,
I think that we underestimate memories of gratitude and how just stopping in the middle of your day or in the middle of a workday between tasks and just quieting your body and thinking of people or places or moments where you were just grateful or you had appreciation.
mm,
And if we can do that every day, just for 5 minutes, we are constantly building joy neurologically in our brains,
mm.
but also in our hearts and our vision of how we see the world. So I find joy in memories and moments.
Of that. You sparked a lot of joyful memories in my mind just as you were saying that. Especially, yeah, it's good to stop in the middle of busyness
Hmm.
when you can lose sight of everything. When
Yeah.
any outcome, you're just trying to get through the moment, you know?
Hmm.
So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So Julia, the way people can keep in touch with you is through the website for More Grace Ministries, is that
That's right.
right?
Yeah,
Yes.
moregraceministries.com. My wonderful husband and ministry partner, Ricky D. Moore, is my project manager, and he or I will reach out.
And if you could just say briefly what you're really looking to funding support for a particular memorial project right now. Can you
Yes,
describe
yes.
that one?
Thank you. So the descendants, both black and white, of Providence Presbyterian Church in Matthews Merkland, which is the African American church, they have come together. They've worked almost 3 years envisioning a beautiful memorial to mark the unmarked. And so an architect has already done the design. And so we need to raise uh, a number of $55,000 to finish the memorial design. We've got all the churches have approved. The design is ready to go. We even have a structural engineer ready to roll. And we just need to cover the material cost for
Yeah.
building the actual memorial. So
Uh,
if there's a way, if people want to support that initiative and bring those communities further together, you can give also at moregraceministries.com.
Beautiful. It is. I can attest to the design. It's just beautiful and very moving. Just the images of it, are very emotional. So thank you for doing this work, Julia. Say hi to Ricky and thank him too. I know you two are a real team, working on this together. So, thank you for being with us. And I want to thank everyone who's tuned in for, joining Third Things First. I do hope you found renewed hope here, and that even in the midst of generational conflict, there are ways forward and there's ways to build abundant life together. So I hope you'll visit our website, thewickedtruth.com, to join the conversation and be in community with people like you who are seeking to change things for the better. So until next time, please remember, always mourn the wicked. It's what good people do.